I wanted to take a minute today at the beginning of the podcast and say thank you to our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. Huber has actually been a sponsor of the podcast since 2020 when we decided to start this little endeavor. Without our sponsors, this content is probably not something that happens. But I think the best part about having Huber as a partner on this is it's an incredibly authentic alignment. Peter, Steve, and I all use Huber Woods. I've been using Advantech Subfloor for coming on probably 21 years now. I've been using Zip System and Zip System with the insulation on the back, the Zip R, since 2013. It's a system that I believe in. That systems approach where things play well together. They have design parameters that allow you to use their system for what you're working on. It works. Their tech support's there. Their knowledge is there. I've never had an issue with their product, and it's a great thing that they've decided to sponsor the podcast. So thank you, Huber Engineered Woods.
Welcome to the Unbuilt It Podcast. I'm your host, Pete Yost. This is my good buddy, Steve Basic.
Howdy.
And we have a special guest, so we kicked Jake out of the room. It's Eric Aune, and you are a master plumber, mechanical engineer, super plumber. Good guy, plumber.
You know, I'm thinking maybe he could become a full-time replacement for Jake.
We'll have to vote on it. Does Jake get to vote?
No, but okay. He can vote. I don't care.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, Eric. Why don't you just start by, and I know you've done some podcasts with us before, don't just talk about who you are and what you do.
I am a licensed plumber. I live in Minnesota, work out of the Minneapolis area. These days, I do mostly service repair, working directly for my customers, homeowners. I started in the industry nearly 25 years ago doing new construction as an apprentice and worked in that side of the industry for many years. But as a self-employed plumber for the last 15 years or so, do a lot of service repair, do a fair amount of heating systems with hydronics, and less new construction these days, but it's still a big part of being a plumber. I have to be up and ready to work on it when needed.
Yeah. And so we're going to focus particularly on distribution systems. And it's because I'm sure everybody who's watching this or listening to this podcast will agree. When you turn on the hot water, you really ought to have hot water. So we're going to talk about what are the issues with existing distribution systems. And I will preface this by saying both Steve and I, when we were working at Building Science Corporation, met a guy named Gary Klein. And this is like his mission in life is to eliminate the wasted energy and water associated with lousy distribution systems for hot water. But those two are not nearly as important as what aspect of lousy hot water distribution systems?
Just the energy savings or the water conservation or the comfort of our customers.
Yeah. So, a lot of people do want to save water. A lot of people want to save energy, but nobody is particularly happy when they run for 3 gallons of water to get what they wanted, which is hot water.
Yeah. I would say that my customers' number one concern is waiting. Although maybe some are worried about what's truly happening while they're doing that. They're wasting water. They're wasting energy. It's water that they heated once. It cooled down in the piping.
Yeah.
Or, and then had to be redelivered again, going down the drain. We waste a lot of water doing that.
I think it's psychological. These people, they'll go to Disney, they'll wait 2 hours in a line. And somehow that's okay.
Yeah, but
to stand in the shower and wait 30 seconds for hot water, it's like a lifetime.
I do see your point, but I see myself standing in line at Disney and like, I'm going to get to go on the ride. I'm not at my sink going, I can't wait for hot water. I
do.
You're a funny guy.
Excited.
I think it's expectations, right? Like you expect you're going to take a while to get to the front of the line. I think you expect the water to be hot as soon as you turn the faucet on. It says hot on the handle. Why isn't it hot when I turn it on?
Hot? Yeah.
But let's go back to design.
Go ahead.
Right? Because
I'm just here listening.
For new construction, can we...
Well, I got a question for you, though. And I'm serious. Sorry. You said most of your work is repair work. There's a chance there's maybe a young plumber out there. I want to know why the choice to become a guy who would rather fix existing systems. I'm not slapping. I'm sliding. fixing existing systems versus saying do new construction? And before you answer, is it because new construction is kind of cutthroat pricing and like you don't want to play in that arena, as well as you don't want to be locked into a job for 2-3 weeks and then have to return, because I can see the advantage to me would be, hey, I can go there 2-3 days. I swap out the boiler. I'm done. It looks beautiful. I charged a boatload because they were in an emergency situation. Everybody's happy.
I feel like
I'm not exploiting you.
I feel like a lot of what you said is the answer to your question. Also, keep in mind, for anybody listening that doesn't know or watching, I don't have employees working with me every day.
Right,
I'm working alone. So the business model of working directly for the customer, solving, answering the call when they've got a problem is way better for me than signing on with a builder, committing myself for a week at a time to do new rough and plumbing on new home construction, right? Like you said. So
and they want the bottom line price, and
it's very hard to be competitive when I'm not doing the kind of volume a company that has 30 plumbers with 15 trucks can pull off in a year versus one. So just to answer that, why do I do this? I don't want to have employees. We've done well since nearly 20 years of self-employment to do it the way we're doing. Maybe one day we'll expand, but I'm certain we will stay in the same business model that we're doing now. Just maybe having more people doing it.
I mean, I was just trying to get it because there's probably a lot of young plumbers. They're sitting there saying, "Oh man, I can't wait to start doing some of these really large houses and stuff." And it's like, maybe the repair side isn't such a bad deal. You got to be careful what you ask for.
I think it's a great way to start in the industry. New construction is it's great work. It's rewarding. It pays very well, and you'll stay busy. We're not going to stop building homes anytime soon. We've proven that decade over decade. But the stuff never gets any newer. It always is going to age, and it's going to need repaired one day or not another.
I think your answer is interesting to me because I just assume that retrofit is always more uncertain, more of a pain in the butt, and what you're saying is, no, it's actually easier if it's just me working on the project.
I like it. Look, I'm not going to deny a little bit of it as an ego thing. I like solving problems. It's not like a Superman complex, but when I come in and something doesn't work and when I leave, it is, people are happy with that. And it's self-satisfaction. And it pays well. It just does. We're not taking advantage of people. It's just market rate pricing and, working on things and fixing them. It doesn't pay the same as installing them new. It just doesn't.
I got to say that if Marvel ever does like a superhero plumber, I think you'd be great for that. But Steve, I wanted to ask you, if we're doing new construction, have you ever been told, hey, our customer's number one complaint is getting hot water. Can you solve as an architect?
Never been.
No? The name Artistic Homes ring a bell? No. Oh, okay.
I'm messing with you. Yeah, we actually had a development where we were limited to 25 feet from water heater or water heating device to all the plumbing fixtures.
And the thing I like about that is, so a lot of architects would have said, I'm out of here. I'm a designer. Steve's response, and I'll put words in his mouth, was, it's just another design constraint. Right, yeah. I just have to solve for that.
Yeah. It's like you were saying, problem solving. It's fun when you get a little challenge. You go, wow.
And for Artistic Homes, they were all slab on grade, so the piping was in the slab. A lot of problems with the insulation getting torn off by the concrete flat work folks, and they had a lot of complaints about hot water. And the water heating tank was almost always in the back of the garage, wasn't it?
It was originally, and then we moved it in because we moved to instantaneous.
Oh, you did. You switched over to instantaneous, which we do want to talk about in terms of hot water. But Eric,
can we talk? Can we call them tankless?
Tankless.
Yeah. Okay. Tankless.
Yeah.
I just want I want to bring that up because when we say instantaneous, especially somebody like you, Steve, if people are listening, they're hanging on every other word.
I hang on every word of this.
If you say instantaneous, it brings to mind that it should happen immediately. And there's the physics of any piping system that water has to get from here
at the fixture.
Has to get from here to there, regardless. And it might be 20 feet, might be 10, it might be 100,
but it's not
instant. And so like, if we just call it that, it's hard. Sorry.
Well, it's all the plumbers in New England. They taught me wrong.
No, look, it's a term that's been out there for a long time. I'm not exactly sure where it comes from, but it'd be nice if people would.
Well, that's the marketing people for these different companies.
Doing more harm than good by using instantaneous.
Hey, if you say instantaneous, people start thinking like that's immediate.
That's great.
We want it now. We love to pay a lot of money for that.
So, Eric, are there ways that we can use technology and smart design to take care of less energy use, less wasted water, but most importantly, people getting hot water when they want it?
There are, and we've had a lot of the technologies existed for years.
Yeah.
Like in the case where you've got a limit of 25 feet from the water heater, you could start looking at really point of use, tankless or maybe small storage, right? So that you could have multiple heat sources throughout a project, throughout the same structure. That's one way of doing it. Mm-hmm. We've got ways of piping systems that are, I think Gary Klein talks about. I've yet to meet Gary, and I want to learn a lot more about what he talks about because it sounds fascinating to me. I've only been introduced digitally with him, but I look forward to learning more about what he talks about. But it sounds really similar to what we've been doing for a few years.
I think he's going to be at Build Show Live.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, Gary's going to be at Build Show Live?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I think you're right about that.
He is involved in the BS and Beer series, but he's going to be at Build Live, huh?
Yeah.
Cool.
November 8, 9, 10? 7, 8, 9. November 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
Here in Austin.
Cool.
Be there. Don't make me come hunt you.
But that distribution though is like, especially on the new construction side where we've got control of, we get to start with a blank slate.
Yeah.
You can do very simple piping installations for potable, domestic hot water distribution using very low amounts of material, way less wasted material, way less water volume content in a system just by centralizing the where the branches are coming off of mains and then recirculating those mains. There's ways of getting hot water to the fixtures nearly immediately or within just seconds of opening up a faucet, and doing that with just the most conventional materials that we're using every single day now.
So when you say, the sort of a trunk and a branch approach, I know that Gary says, look, if you use the right diameter pipe for the main trunk, and then the branches are an appropriately sized piping diameter for that particular draw, his goal is a cup of water or less of cooled hot water before you get the rest.
And that's ambitious, and I'm sure it can be done in a lot of situations. Maybe not all the time, but I would imagine he knows more about it than I do. I can tell you, maybe with slightly more than a cup, we can do it within just a few seconds. And I mean 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds versus traditional trunk and branch systems that were taking a minute, 2 minutes, depending on, like, I live in a 2-story home. Our primary bathroom is minimum 70 piping feet away from the water heater.
Wow.
And it doesn't want to get there very quickly. Right. But we have of course I built the house, so I have a dedicated return line back to the water heater, and I have it circulating so that we don't wait. But within just a couple feet of piping from that main line, you're drawing off of there just to the fixture. You should be able to clear that out quickly. Maybe it's more than a cup of water, but it can deliver hot right now.
So the system that Gary talks about is always an on-demand system. So there's a high-speed pump, and its job is to push the cooled hot water out and replace it with charge.
Is that what pumps do?
That's the rumor.
Yeah.
And so the question then becomes, well, if it's a constantly running recirculation system, doesn't seem very energy efficient, but on demand means that some trigger is invoking turning that pump on, and there's a bunch of different ways you can do that, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways. Some of them been around for quite a few years, more than a decade. You could use something like a motion sensor in the bathroom, right, or in the kitchen or in the laundry room. So as soon as you walk into the space that maybe you're not typically occupying, it's going to kick on that circulator to move that water in the system. That's maybe a little less favored to something like a push button There's all kinds of marketing terms, some of the manufacturers call it hot button or whatever.
Yeah.
That's just literally like think of a toggle switch or a doorbell, right? Push a button, you're intentionally demanding hot water, but it's going to kick on that pump. The motion sensor, maybe you don't need hot water just because you walked into the room.
Yep.
But it turns that system on. Maybe
what if the cat walks in the bathroom? Then all of a sudden you get hot
well,
water.
if the
with
cat
motion
needs hot
sensor.
water, that's the deal.
No, but that being the contrast, like why it maybe isn't a better system than the push button. But there's other ways to do it too. So we've got water heating sources like tankless water heaters on demand that maybe have a circulating pump built into them. Maybe we can use these little crossover valves that are installed underneath like a far sink, maybe multiple of these crossover valves throughout the house, to where what's happening is those are thermostatic. So they're paired up with in no other way than just connected to the piping system, where they're bridging from hot to cold underneath a fixture. And you're using like a delta P or pressure proportionate circulator or pump. People call them pumps all the time. That's fine. And it's going to want to increase the head pressure in the system. So as that little crossover valve starts to open up, because the water is cool at that point, it wants hot water to flow through it. So then it closes the valve. That pump is speeding up, slowing down automatically. That's a really good and easy way to create a on-demand circulating system. Is based off of simply temperature alone.
Yeah. And you said that there's also, you could do scheduled timing, right?
Yeah. So you've got appliances like I brought up just a second ago, go further into that. Tankless water heaters are probably the best example of this, because they're being more or less, all of them are coming out with this technology now, at least as an option, a model option, where it's got a circulator built into it. You use that crossover valve or a dedicated return. Okay. So maybe it's retrofit or new construction. And you can access the programming within the water heater to supply hot water recirculated during certain periods of time during the day. You can have there's availability now. They're using AI built into them to learn your water usage patterns, and they're doing that like every single day for 7-day periods, things like that. So it's just constantly just anticipating your use, so that it's providing that hot water when you need it versus waiting kind of scenario. So there's all types of manual to now we're literally using AI. You can schedule things and have connected apps, stuff like that, to control these systems too.
So that covers pretty much all of new construction, but a lot of what you're doing is working with existing customers, and they may have systems where they're waiting for a long time for hot water. How is it different to do reduced water use and greater comfort in a remodeling situation?
It's a lot easier than you think, actually. So like with this new technology, these circulators, these crossover valves.
And when you say crossover valves, you mean from hot to cold?
Yeah. So it's a totally code approved device. It meets all the standards as far as cross connection and things like that. It's not a backflow device,
right?
But it's completely accepted by all the major code bodies to allow a connection between hot and cold. And what it does is it's a think of a plastic plumbing T, but inside this plumbing T is a usually serviceable like thermostatic valve, similar to what's into like a mixing valve you might put on a water heater, or to prevent scald prevention, stuff like that. These are not anti-scald devices, but they're just a valve that is kind of never fully closed or fully open, and it's temperature activated. So it's allowing water then from the hot source, your water heater, at the fixture further away from the water heater. It's allowing the water to be pushed through that hot line into the cold through this little crossover valve. And once that valve senses the water is hot, it more or less closes or slows way down, allowing less flow through it. That pump down at the water heater that we can install now as a retrofit, or we can do this on new construction as well. We can install this little circulator pump at the water heater. Think of a tank water heater, a electric tank, a heat pump, doesn't matter, gas. And it's just wanting to pump water through that hot line, through that little valve further down the line to keep that whole loop of piping warm.
So it just occurred to me that one of the ways that I met Gary was that I worked on developing the EPA Water Sense program. I don't know how familiar you are with that.
A little bit, yeah.
So dealing with hot water was one of the elements of the Water Sense program. And it's essentially like an Energy Star, but for water.
Yep.
In fact, when I was working on the program, the people at the EPA Office of Water wanted to call it Water Star. And the people at Energy Star, this is two different federal agencies. They started to say, no, you're encroaching on our brand name. It's like, you work for the federal government.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you want them to use that rather than it's a compliment, not a brand competition? Anyway. Yeah. And it got so weird that the people of Office of Water were told by Energy Star, our territory includes the hot water tap. You only get the cold water tap. And a bunch of us are looking like, oh my gosh, if the taxpayer could see two federal agencies arguing over who got which tap at the sink, like, yeah, they would be.
Well, we're only, last I checked, we're installing one faucet that does hot and cold. So we need a different name, I guess.
Well, then they'd have to work together.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid. But part of that program included efficient hot water, and a lot of it was about the work that Gary was doing on water distribution systems. But it also occurred to me that one of the things that came about is that in order to get the water efficiency ratings, you actually had to meet the water pressure. In other words, if you have a low flow device, but 100 PSI is being delivered to every fixture, it's not going to behave the same way as if it was receiving, say, 50 PSI.
Right.
And so pressure reducing controllers was introduced as an element of the Water Sense program. And at our house in Brattleboro, I put a pressure gauge on our outside tap, and, you know, it has a pin dial. So, and it was routinely going over 100 PSI because it was town feed, gravity feed from, and it just varied.
Your proximity to
my proximity to that. So the plumber we were working with said, you know, that's not a good thing to have that much pressure. More pressure is better. So he put in a pressure regulator to knock it down to 55. And that meant that all the low flow devices worked better, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought that was pretty cool. But the other thing, and I wanted to see what you think about this, is that there are two places in a lot of houses where it's a 1/4-inch line, like supplying the ice maker.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been told that is not rated for above like 75 PSI.
Well, throughout the plumbing system in general, you've got a lot of devices that aren't rated for those high operating pressures. Think of the fill valve in your toilet. Okay, so those are
And I often wondered about those.
Those are traditionally, I mean, those are made to operate, 50, 60 PSI normal static pressure. And so you get up 75, 80 PSI. That's the upper limit that I work in Minnesota. We have the UPC that is made a boutique Minnesota code, but it's UPC. Uniform Plumbing Code. You've got the IP, International Plumbing Code. Both of those state at 80 PSI, you need to install a pressure regulating device because of safety, number one, and then two, performance is and that's the performance side of it is often like left out of the conversation completely. Hot water delivery or water delivery in general at lower pressures, properly sized pipe is going to be more efficient at a lower pressure versus high.
So I think it's fascinating because the program was originally focused on sort of the end point, like the water spigots and the shower heads and low flush toilets. But a lot of that gets sort of blown if you don't have something as kind of basic as a pressure regulator, so that you're not delivering over 50 PSI in a home. Because when I talked to the plumber in Brattleboro about this, he goes, "Oh yeah, everybody should be installing these." Probably everybody in Brattleboro is popping above 80 at some point during the day or during the month. And so I didn't know I thought it was only restricted to, these 1/4-inch supply lines for certain things, but it's interesting to learn.
So there, as you know, there are different plumbing codes almost from one state to the next, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wish our country didn't operate that way, but so I can't say as a blanket statement every code is that way, but I'm willing to guess that they are. I know that the UPC is, and the UPC has been adopted by 24 states. So the rest of the states that have plumbing codes are the international code, and I know that says it too.
Yeah.
So like in one form or another, whether your code is an amended version of those national codes, it most likely includes that. And that to me, and so in my case, I could say for sure in Minnesota, that's on the plumber. Some municipalities have said, no, if you're on this side of this highway and north of here, like every house has to have it. So they're just giving you the heads up. Like when we come inspect the new construction plumbing, we're going to also be looking for this, but that's on the plumber because it's part of the code.
Yeah.
And so that's just part of the installation.
Well,
I have a code question. It's like extremely fundamental, but I don't know the answer to it.
I don't know if I will either.
I'm going to say I do, just
Okay.
to be different.
Is it a code requirement to have hot water in a house?
Absolutely. 100%.
It is?
Yep.
It is in there. So
Yeah.
I couldn't build, if I chose to, I can't build a house that's just cold water piping.
No. So the UPC said,
Great question.
this UPC states that you have to have one bathing unit, and it has to, that at minimum would have to be I believe would have to be a bathtub.
But that's not true though.
Hold
not
on, I'm
in
not done.
Massachusetts,
You have
no.
to have a toilet.
Yep.
You have to have a kitchen style sink. They're calling it a kitchen sink. You have to have a sink that could function as a kitchen sink in one capacity or another, and not typically in a bathroom. So you basically have to have a bathroom and a kitchen. You have to have a way to wash clothes, and you have to supply all of those fixtures that require hot water with hot water.
You do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But so the plumbing though, I know this. We had a project up by us, and the homeowner said, do I have to put a bathtub in? And I didn't know the answer. So the builder asked the plumbing inspector. Plumbing inspector said, funny, I don't know the answer. He wrote to the Massachusetts state plumbing inspector and said it's not a requirement to have a bathtub in the house.
And again, I may have misspoke there. I think at one point
No, it could be just Massachusetts.
No,
too.
but I think at one point in time it may have said bathtub, but I know I've done houses that did not have a bathtub.
Right.
Point being is this: I think
I mean, we
at the
always use that. It's
discretion of
one of
our-
those myths.
yeah, at
We
the
always say, well, you
discretion
want to
of
place grandkids or somebody come over,
Right.
you want to be able to give a bath or
Exactly.
a dog or
Yeah.
you need something, but the code doesn't require it. And I was wondering
I think
if
it
it
says
requires
bathing
hot
unit.
water.
Let's be,
But
I'll
it
be
does
honest with you.
stipulate very specifically that you need hot water.
See, I thought what it was that Steve wanted to design a house that he couldn't get into any hot water.
But
That was good.
And with that, I think.
No. Because I
You're
got to tell you
not
about
done
this. No, because I got to tell you about this guy that called me the other day.
All right.
He called me. He wanted to sell me a coffin.
You wanted to say you're coughing? Like
Yeah.
planning for the future?
No, I told him, I said, that's the last thing I need.
You know,
yeah, Yeah.
my wife says that she loves it every time you make me speechless. So thank you for my wife, Christine.
There you have it.
If you have questions that you would like to submit, especially on plumbing to our friend here, Eric,
Yeah.
You can
we can
send
put, you
those.
want to tell us, why don't you tell everybody your cell phone number in case you have questions?
it's at Mechanical Hub on Instagram. That's my cell phone number.
All right. That's right. I'll just post his cell phone number later.
questions at Unbuild It Podcast. And Eric, can't thank you enough for being
I
and
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
seriously.
Tolerating
Thank you,
the
man.
two of
This was
us.
awesome.
for some period of time.
This was awesome.
Yeah.
I love talking about this stuff, so I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for having me.
Great.
Have you ever flushed golf balls?
Have you seen the video?
Yeah.
Aren't they funny? The guy's like, I'm at Home Depot right now, and I don't know which toilet to buy.
This thing could flush
This thing
12 golf balls.
but this one will flush 14 ping pong balls. I'm like, what's better, a golf ball or a ping pong ball?
You ever seen those videos?
I have not seen those videos,
This-
but there's
You
a
gotta- you gotta
lot
get out more.
on Instagram.
Well, you
that
don't
I
go on
haven't
social
seen.
media, so yeah, that
This
explains a lot.
podcast it takes some turns with him, doesn't it?
There's a lot of turns. You can count on those on a regular basis.
Yeah, but that's my mind is.
And yet
I
you-
told you up there, it's the micro and the macro. Like the galaxy is competing with nanotechnology.
And yet you've turned out pretty well.
All right.
See you around.
Bye bye.